Hey guys, welcome to another weekly focus. So I had a really good week trading. I think that was gold, and we'll just do a quick trade recap and I'll show you guys the position I had on gold. And I spoke about this last week, so let's do a quick trade recap on that. Alright, so I got in on this position on June 9th. So I got in on the 9th of June, and it was a buy position. And if you look at previous focus, you see I was talking about the pullback. There was a level, there was a trend line on the 8-hour time frame I was paying attention to. So this was the bounce off of the 8-hour time frame trend line. It was a counter trend line, I think, coming from this upper side. So we had a bounce off of this area, and I was looking for buying opportunities. So if you look at this piece right here, here's my thought process. You had a push to the upside, you had a consolidation, then you had buys again to the upside. You could have taken the buys from here or from here. Then we had another push again to the upside. So just the same principle. We wait for the pullback to come in or the consolidation. You could take the buys from here or from here. So I didn't get in at this point because I think I was late when I saw the position thing. So I got in at this area. Now the intention again was just to see price taking out this highs. So that was my initial thought process right there. And this is the only pair I traded this week. So not last week, yeah, this week. So once we had an initial push to the upside, and I always like following the market flow thing, which is very important to me. So I had my entries off of this area right here. The stop loss on this was really tight. And as price started moving to the upside, I'll show you, there was a minor structure thing that was created right here. So this alone told me there's a high possibility this price can pull back and take me out. So I had to move my stops to break even. So that was a management at this point, move my stops to break even. And I had this area right here. I had my alert set at this point. So if price gets to, there was a minor psychological level at that point, which on lower time frames you can look at it. I think that was 3,400. So that's something I was paying attention to as well for my profit targets and everything. And eventually, if you look at this piece right here, we had this movement thing to the upside, and there was a slow movement to the upside, but eventually we took out these highs and we had a further push again to the upside. So my initial target thing was at 3,400, but I let price run a little bit and I closed a little bit higher. So looking at this piece right here, we closed at about plus 9%. Now, when you look at the risk to reward on this trade, it's almost a 1:18 risk to reward on that trade. But I didn't get in with 1%. I think I got in with like 0.5%. So that was a 9% trade right there. But if you got in, let's say with 1%, that's 18% made on that piece right there. So currently, I'm in on another trade. So here is a trade I'm in on today, Friday, and I'm currently in a drawdown on this one. So I'll hold this all, let's say, to next week and see how it plays out. So same thing. It's an impulse inability around this area. There's a push to the downside. There's an impulse. So same thing. I'm looking at this inability right here. Looking at the inability just so we can get a push to the downside. So that's my thought process currently, and I'll break this down when we do the market focus. But with this trade, I'm currently in a drawdown. So that's it for the trade recap, guys. So let's look at what actually makes sense and the most interesting thing. Alright guys, so here's a DXY on the weekly time frame, and this is really interesting because there's a structure we've been looking at, and we've had this trend line for a very long time. So finally, looking at this on the weekly time frame, price has finally gotten to this trend line. So we've been looking at this, and the thought process on this was, if you see price moving impulsively to the upside, there's an inability, then you get a push to the downside, there's an impulse. As price comes back, you're looking at these areas as pivot points, and you're expecting prices to bounce off of this area and move to the upside. So we've been looking at this correction coming in for a couple of weeks now. So finally, we've gotten to this point. So my thought process right now, just zoom into this area and show you guys the things I'm paying attention to. So let's zoom in right here. So here's my thought process at this point, just looking at this on the weekly time frame. Now there's a couple of things I like looking at. The first thing is, where is price at, and where is price most likely going to gravitate to? So if you look at this based off of that, the psychological levels, which is very important. The first psychological level, we have 100 right here, we have 90 to the downside, and then we have 110. So this is really important because price is currently trading below 100, and I understand we currently sat at this trend line right here, which is a trend line that has been holding for the weekly time frame. Now that's a trend line on the weekly time frame. It tells you that a couple of years price has been playing within the structure. So first thing, price is currently sat below 100. So if price has to keep moving to the downside and violating this trend line, then we could say price is headed all the way to the next psychological level, which is 90. So just looking at it, weekly time frame, trend line psychological level. Now, if price has to react from this pivot point right here, where is price most likely going to gravitate to? The first area we're looking at is this psychological level of 100. So we're looking at the psychological level. You get a bounce, you get a test of this psychological level of 100. If price succeeds to go above this area, you get a pullback. You can come even deeper, and we're expecting prices to move again to the upside. So just looking at it from the weekly time frame, it makes it really interesting when you start looking at the structures and everything. Now, first thing, price is pulled back to our weekly trend line level. So if I clean everything, and if you zoom out, you see prices pulled back to this area. And this, if you look at this channel thing, so this channel has been going on. So if you look at this channel thing right here, so this channel has been going on for quite some time. So this piece right here, I think 2010, 2008, I think from 2008 all the way to like 2025. So we've been playing within this channel. So every time price comes to an area like this, you see buyers reacting from this point. Price comes to this area, you see buyers reacting from this point, and it's always this impulsive move to the upside. So if you see this piece right here, I'm still expecting buyers to react and take prices to the upside. Now, if we get a violation of this trend line, then I'm expecting prices to head all the way to 90, which is the next psychological level to the downside. So just looking at it on the weekly time frame, you can have like the bigger picture thing, and you're asking yourself, so if price stays above this trend line, where is price most likely going to gravitate to? So first psychological level 100, and the next psychological level 110. So as we move down to lower time frames, let's step down to the daily time frame. And once you step down to lower time frames, or once I step down to lower time frames, what I like looking at is like the market flow. And you have a trend line, then you have the market flow. So the trend line is showing you that the market flow is just a piece within, let's say, the channel, within the bigger trend line and stuff like that. So with this piece, we had price coming to the downside, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows and lower highs. And price was doing this and then giving you this impulsive moves to the downside. So I was sat here looking at this. We had this piece right here. Here was an impulsive move to the downside. Then came the correction or the pullback, and we had a violation again to the downside. Now, eventually, we took out this point, which is something I've been looking at. So let's zoom into this piece right here. So let's zoom in, because this, yeah, just looking at the DXY, it looks really interesting because there's a lot that can happen. So let's look at this piece again. So we had this impulsive move to the downside, we had a correction, this area got taken out, and once we took out this correction or that minor trend line thing, I was looking at these lows right here. Spoke about this last week as well, and the simple question is price going to take out those lows? And if price takes out the lows, how is price moving to the downside? Because if it's impulsive, then we could see this trend line on the weekly time frame get taken out. So those are the things I'm paying attention to. So as price starts coming to the downside, it gives me this market flow, which is just like the minor structure within it. So you have an impulse, you have a correction, then you have another impulse to the downside. So just looking at this, I'm expecting prices again to pull back, and for two things to happen. You either get a break of this trend line, which is from the daily time frame, is a counter trend line. So you either get a break of this trend line right here and price moves to the upside to 100, or you get a reaction from this point right here. You get an aggressive reaction again from the sellers, and you see prices moving again to the downside, which is the same thing we've been looking at on the weekly time frame. So it's very It's very important to look at price this way. Trend line, psychological level, and you can look at it clearly. We're still trading below 100. So if price finds it difficult, so let's say price comes back, there's an inability for price to go through, price comes back, there's an inability to go through, then price has nothing else to do then drop to like the 90 psychological level. But if we go through this area first of all, so we're looking at this space right here, if we break out of this area, then there's nothing stopping us from getting to the first psychological level, which is 100. We'll wait for the reaction at this point. If there's an inability to go through, you see price coming back to the downside. But if price eventually goes through, like there's a break, you wait for a pullback, and you see prices moving again to the upside. So that's always my thought process when I'm looking at it. Now, the reason I'm looking at this minor structure for the market flow is simply because it gives me just like this immediate thing to pay attention to while I'm looking at price. So that's something I'm looking on the daily time frame. Step down to the 8-hour time frame, same pace of price action. So here's the piece I'm paying attention to. You have this piece right here and you have this piece right here. It's an impulse, and then there's a correction, there's another impulse to the downside. So I'm waiting for a correction again to the upside. So coming into next week, I'm expecting buys on the DXY, and you see why I had those sells on gold. That's just because of this piece right here. Inability for price to go through this area. I'm expecting a push again to the upside, then maybe sells or this area getting breached and price moving to the upside. So that's it. On the 8-hour time frame, 4-hour time frame is going to be the same thing, not much of a difference. So same piece right here, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, and I'm waiting for the correction. So that's my analysis right there on the DXY. I'll look at the 4-hour time frame, look at the 8-hour time frame, but I'm expecting prices to move to the upside. Now, if we're looking at this market flow thing again, you could look at this piece right here and expect prices to come back to this area. So it's been an impulse, then there's a correction. You're looking at an impulse, maybe to this piece right here. So if I'm looking at the roadblocks, as prices moving to the upside on the DXY, this is like an area I'll pay attention to. And I always use trend lines just to see and guide the movement of price action. So that's my analysis right there on the DXY. I'm expecting some buys to the upside, and for us to then deliver prices to higher time frames, or the trend line to higher time frames. Then we can step back to those higher time frames like the daily and actually see what price is trying to do, or step on to, let's say, the weekly time frame and see what price is actually trying to do. Because where price is at currently, if we get an inability of a price to go through this area, it's going to be a crazy move to the upside. So that's my analysis right there, and let's take some time and look at gold or the next pairs or the other pairs. So all right guys, let's look at the first one. All right guys, so let's look at gold. And when I come in every day, so I like looking at my charts this way, like just the multi-time frame display. So I'm currently starting in this trade right here, and I'm in a drawdown right now. But I'll just show you guys my thought process and everything and what I was looking at while taking this trade. I took this trade, I think, on, let's say, it's like an hour ago or something. Yeah, I took it an hour ago. So this is what I'm looking at. When you look at this on the weekly time frame, just looking at this piece right here, we had this trend line taken out right here. I mentioned this last week. We had a pullback to an area like this, so we're expecting prices to then come back to the upside. So let's enlarge this piece and I'll show you guys what we're looking at. Start from the weekly time frame real quick. So here's a bigger picture thing on gold. Where is price headed to and where is price at currently? So if you look at your flow thing, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse. You can look at this correction, then an impulse to the upside. So we had a violation of this trend line. We had a test of the trend line thing right there. So we're expecting buyers to still dominate this pair and take prices to the upside. So let's bring this closer. So I have this point here, right? I'm looking at this point where you see the green line. I have my alert at that point because that's the most recent high on the weekly time frame. So where is gold headed to? Now, if you're going off of psychological levels, and because we're trading above 3,000, then we should expect prices to keep moving to the upside all the way to 4,000. Like just going off of the principle of psychological levels. So a rejection at 3,000, you should see prices headed to 4,000. Now this recent high right here coincides with a minor psychological level of 3,500. So that's why I'm paying attention to this piece right here. So you have the most recent high on the weekly time frame, and at the same time you have a psychological level. Now depending on the time frame you're looking at, that psychological level could have some weight, but on the weekly time frame and the monthly time frame, it's not like a major level I'm really paying attention to. But just looking at price and looking at the price action we have right now, the immediate point I want to pay attention to, you have these highs and you have the psychological level of 3,500. So if price has to move to the upside, again, the area we should take out, like the first area of like the point of interest thing, you have these highs right here and you have a psychological level at this point. So we could see prices taking out those levels and you see price moving to the upside. Now at the same time, I'm still looking at this piece on the DXY. So you look at this on the DXY. Yes, we're currently sat on this trend line on the DXY, but if we get a violation of this piece, then the trade I'm currently sat in on gold is just going to take me out. And if the DXY starts moving to the downside, then that's all. You see gold now rising to the upside, and it's going to stop me out on this. So now before this analysis ends, we might even get stopped out. So that's the funny thing about this. So just looking at this on the weekly time frame, so we're still headed to the upside. And if you look at the consolidation thing we've been talking about, price has finally cleared this consolidation if you look at it on lower time frames. So that's not really like my point of interest this week. So you need to step down to lower time frames to see what's happening. So you put this on, let's say, on the daily time frame. Now there's a couple of things I'm looking at. First, you have this trend line. So price is still sat above this trend line, which is completely fine. That's one way. You have this impulse, you had a correction thing, and once you have an impulse and a correction, you're expecting prices to take out these highs. So just looking at it, and know gold has the potential to take out 3,500, to take out those highs, and to take out the psychological level at 3,500. Now when you start putting all these things together, and if you remember, I had this channel thing from last week. So we're looking at this channel right here. So you have this piece right here. So it's always important to look at the trend lines from both directions. So the lower part and the upper part. So price is currently trading above this trend line right here. So because of this, you can gauge the price movement just above that area, and you see price delivering to 3,500 and stuff like that. So that's why I have this trend lines sat here, and I'm just using it to watch how price is moving. But looking at it again, there's a current market flow you can spot. So it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, it's a correction, and it's an impulse. So the reason I had those sales again is because I'm expecting prices to pull back to the downside, just respecting this piece of price action right here. And you see it clearly on the 8-hour time frame. Let's see if I have this space. All right, perfect. So here was a piece I was looking at last week. Price coming back to this area, and I was expecting a movement thing to the upside, and I got those entries, got those buys. Now once you look at the current market flow, and it's something I like talking about a lot. So the current market flow on gold, it's an impulse right here, it's a correction, impulse, correction, that's an impulse. So I'm expecting a correction back to this area, and for us to take prices again to the upside, and you could even see prices coming back lower. So it depends on what happens at this area right here. So this piece right here is very important. If price stays below that point, then we could see prices moving again to the downside. All right, so let's look at the 4-hour time frame and see how this aligns with the 4-hour time frame. So once you step down to the 4-hour time frame, so here's what I'm looking at. So yeah, on the 4-hour time frame is the same piece, right, like what I was looking on the 8-hour time frame. Current price action, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, and I'm waiting for prices to pull back to the downside and for us to take buys again to the upside. Now if this piece right here doesn't hold through this area, so if it doesn't hold through and price just goes above this area, I'll show you guys something else I was looking at, and there's still a possibility to take buys after we get stopped out on this, or if we get stopped out on this piece right here. So looking at it, same thing, impulse, inability, you see price coming down, there's an impulse, I'm waiting for this inability, so we can see prices coming back to the downside. So let's look at this, I think, on the hourly. Let's see. Yeah, so that's my position right there. So I have this position on gold currently, and I'm in a drawdown right now on this piece right here, but I'm expecting sales to come in and take prices to the downside with my stop loss just above this area right here. So that's what I'm looking at. Now let's look at this and I'll show you the other possibility I'm looking at. So if you look at this, just going off of like the principle of trend lines and everything, if this area doesn't hold through, there's still a possibility for us to take the buys, because this guy can still move to the upside. So now there's going to be another modification. So let's take this and I'll keep this away for now. So let's put this on the 4-hour time frame only. Perfect. So I'll show you guys another piece we could look at. So you get price reacting from this area. So that's the pivot point, and every pivot point gives you another build-up or another trend line. So you can look at this piece right here and you play with this structure right here. So this is another possibility right here. I'll make this visible to you. So let's have this right here. So that's a bigger structure thing I'm looking at on gold, just in case the piece I'm looking at fails. So there's still a possibility you could look at this piece. It's an impulse, it's a correction, and this, and we could see price coming back to this area. So this will be the piece I'll play with, just in case the sales do not hold through. So if this piece right here, so let's clean this. So here's what I'm looking at right here. So if this structure here fails to hold through, if it fails and we cannot take prices to the downside, then that's a bigger picture thing I'm looking at right there. So how do you get involved in a situation like this? You wait for this piece to get taken out, you wait for price to come back, inability, and you can take those buys again to the upside. Now the first area, like the point of interest again, psychological level, the green line thing of 3500, and we could see price breaking impulsively and moving again to this piece right here. So that's something I'm paying attention to, but currently we're not looking at that right now. So I'll take this out, and yeah, I'll just keep price the way it is. And this is what I'm still looking at on the 8-hour time frame, looking at the same thing on the 4-hour time frame. And if you look at this on the hourly, then you see the position thing I'm currently sat in. So an inability for prices to sell, then we'll look for buying opportunities. But that's my trade right there on gold. And if you start looking at this from the weekly time frame, you can see what's actually happening, like what's playing out on this pair. You step down to the daily, you see the same thing. Yeah, I have a little bit more trend lines on this, and it might be confusing, but if you've been looking at prices with trend lines, it's very easy to see what's happening in the 8 hours. Less trend lines on the 8-hour time frame. And again, I have this minor structure just to follow price, especially the channels. I use it to see like the movement thing. And once you get to like the 4-hour time frame, there's the piece we're playing with. So it's an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse, and I'm expecting a correction. All right, guys, so that's my analysis right there on gold, and I'll keep you guys updated, and let's look at the next pair. Alright guys, so let's look at the indices, and I haven't really traded indices like I've been trading gold, and indices is usually like the first thing I look at or my go-to, but I haven't really spent time trading indices because with Trump, the tariffs and everything, it's made it really difficult for me to spot certain setups on these indices. But I still do the analysis on these pairs, but I don't really trade it that much. So let's look at this. So let's start on the weekly time frame. So let's keep this on the weekly real quick. So let's look at this and try to make sense of what's happening. So I always like looking at psychological levels and looking at trend lines and sometimes the channels as well, just to see what price is doing. So if you zoom out on this pair, you can actually see what price is doing. And with the current market flow thing on this pair, it's an impulse, then it's a correction, then it's an impulse and a correction, we've had this price coming to the upside. So normally I was expecting price to then push again to the upside to this piece right here. So that was something I was expecting on US30. But if you go off of what we was looking at last week, I spoke about the violation of a trend line. So there was a trend line within this area. So if you look at this on lower time frames, you'll see a trend line that got violated, and that already was a concern for me, because once you have a trend line that gets violated, it always tells you something, like it gives you a bigger picture view of what's trying to happen. So I wasn't really like interested with the buys on these indices again, and I was expecting sells. Now if you go off of that principle, where is the area price can gravitate to easily, we're looking at this piece right here. 48,000 is the next psychological level. We see prices moving to the downside, so that's an area I'm paying attention to. But this is on the weekly time frame. So if we start moving to lower time frames, and perfect, so you look at this piece right here. So you had this initial push to the upside right here, and I said this last week. I've looked at this in two different ways, just going off of this trend line to the upside. First, we had a violation. It tells you something. Once you have a trend line, you have a violation, you always want to look at these highs again. Price comes back, it takes out this high, but there's an inability for prices to move to the upside. Let's zoom into this piece right here and look at it on the daily time frame. So you get this piece right here. There's a trend line violation. Price actually takes out this area, which is something I like looking at as well. But there's an inability for price to stay above this area. So just looking at this, where is price most likely going to gravitate to? Now, there's a high possibility we could see price coming back to this psychological level of 40,000. Right here, we could see price coming back to this psychological level of 40,000. But the immediate area I'm paying attention to is this lows right here. So I want to see how price trades to an area like this, because depending on how price pulls back to this area, you could see buyers taking off again to the upside. So that's something I'm paying attention to, and I didn't get in on any positions on US30, but it's going to be like a similar move on NAS and the S&P 500. So just looking at what's happening on US30, you can already anticipate what's going to happen on those other pairs. So, and if this pair start dropping, it can tell you two things. If the DXY is still positively correlated to the indices, as these indices start dropping, if it drops and moves to the downside, you could expect the DXY as well to move to the downside. Then you could see gold now fulfilling that stuff to 3,500 and further push getting closer to like 4,000. So that's always my thought process when I'm looking at it. So that's on the daily time frame. So let's clean this, and if you step down to the 8-hour time frame, here's a channel I was looking at last week. And because I was in the positions on gold, I didn't want to take this trade on US30 and the other ones, because you look at it like two ways. There's this trend line right here taken out. I even looked at it again from the point of, let's say, the channel thing, expecting, let's say, an inability for price to go through this area, so we could see prices moving to the upside. Now you got a violation thing again, and here's just a simple break test, and you should see prices moving to the downside. So personally, I think price will test areas like this. That's the first area I'm paying attention to on US30. So let's put this piece right here and set an alert on this piece. So price, yeah, I want to see how price reacts at this point, and if we drop into the downside, I want to see how price steps down to this piece right here. So that's something I'll be looking at coming into next week. So that's it for me on US30. You can look at this on the 4-hour time frame. Now, if this starts dropping and it gives us, let's say, an impulse, because you always need to look for possibilities to get in as well. So here's an impulse, here's a correction, here's an impulse correction. If we get a correction thing like this, then we could see price coming to the downside. So that's what I'm saying. If we headed to this piece right here, then I'll look for selling opportunities to the downside. So that's something I'm looking at on US30. So look at this again from the daily time frame. You can see what price is trying to do. And if you look at it on lower time frames, the 8-hour time frame, you've taken out the channel, you've taken out the trend line. So I think we're clear to go. So first area is this piece right here, and the next area. So look at this on, sorry. So the first area is this piece right here, and if we go through this area, then we could see prices coming back to 40,000. So that's something I'm paying attention to on US30. So that's my analysis right there on US30. It's pretty straightforward. Now the pair I'm really paying attention to is my stuff on gold, which I'm currently on the drawdown. So let's look at this. Yeah, so here's the pairs I'm really paying attention to because I'm in this trade already. Now let's look at the next pair. So with US30, I'm looking at sales, but let's look at the next pairs, and let's look at NAS, let's look at S&P500, and we'll see what's happening across the board on these indices. Alright guys, so here's NAS100. So let's look at this. Start on the weekly time frame very quick. I didn't set up the charts properly, so alright, cool. So here's NAS100 on the weekly time frame. It's an impulse correction thing, impulse correction, impulse correction. Going off of this space on the weekly time frame, where is price at and where is price most likely going to gravitate to? So price is currently sat above 20,000. If the buyers keep taking prices to the upside, then we have a clear path to 25,000, which is the next psychological level I'm looking at now. While expecting prices to move all the way to the upside, you know it's always going to give you this impulse on the pullback or the impulse on the correction. So looking at on the weekly time frame, it's really difficult to spot this impulse correction thing, because you look at this piece, it's just a movement to the upside. But as you start moving to lower time frames, you might see reasons as to why price might decide to pull back a little bit. So on the daily time frame, yep, let's do the daily time frame. Spoke about this last week, same thing with what's happening on US30. We had this piece right here, that was a trend line thing, impulse correction, you had a violation. So I was looking at this piece. Now I had to look at, I think, the channel thing, just to see and make sure price is really breaking out of this point. So you look at this on the daily time frame, it's an impulse correction, then it failed. You just look at the current market flow thing, impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction. So price is not moving to the upside impulsively as I really wanted it to. So it's just a correction thing around this area. So let's take this out, step down to the 8-hour time frame. Perfect. So on the 8-hour time frame, here's what I'm looking at now. Similar to what I was looking on US30, look at it from the channel point of view, like the last point of defense with this price moving to the upside. You get impulse correction, you still get price breaking out of this point. So next point of interest for me, or the area I'm really expecting prices to get to, you might see prices coming back to this area, and if it keeps moving down impulsively, then I'm expecting prices to test the next psychological level, which is 20,000. So how do I get involved in a situation like this? First, like, we've taken out the trend line, we've taken out the channel, so we should expect sales. Now if you step down to the 4-hour time frame, so same thing, I'll put this piece right here, put an alert right there. Perfect. So I'm expecting prices to get to that area right there. So that's an area I'm looking at. So how do you get involved in a situation like this? And at the same time, this is very, hold on. So let's look at this piece. At the same time, you can look at this on lower time frames and see, because we've taken out this structure right here. So yeah, I think we've taken out this structure. It's now impulse correction, and we could see prices moving to the downside like this, to the downside. So this area right here is a point I'm really paying attention to. So maybe on lower time frames, that's really the 4-hour time frame, let's say the hourly. So let's say on the hourly time frame, so I need to look at this coming into next week, the impulse correction thing. So here's an impulse, that's a correction, price drops, another impulse, and that's a correction, so price is dropping. So depending on how I trade, I like looking at setups and certain confirmations. So it's really difficult because I haven't analyzed this pairs to like call this sales right now, but I'll have a look again. But if price has to move to the downside, I'm looking at impulse correction, and I'm expecting this area to get taken out and for price to keep moving again to this area right here. So that could be a really good trade. Now, depending on how the economic events comes out as well. So there's a lot that can happen, and these guys can still flip and start moving to the upside. That's a crazy thing with these indices. So you look at this piece right here, got taken out. So yeah, so I think we should expect some sales on this pair coming into next week, and I'll look at it again. If there's good positions, if there's good setups, I might look for confirmation on a lower time frame and look for entry. So that's it. It's similar to what's happening on US30. I'm expecting prices to drop to this area. So that's it right there. And on NAS, you look at this on the daily, same thing. I'm expecting prices to drop to an area like this, but just looking at it, you could see the impulse correction thing, correction. So you could still see price playing off of this area and moving again to the upside. That's a funny thing when it comes to trading. Sometimes you can analyze and price does something completely different. So that's my analysis right there on NAS100, and I said this already, I'm not really paying attention to indices compared to gold. I'm paying more attention to gold compared to these indices right now. So let's look at the last one. Alright guys, so let's look at the S&P 500, and here's the last analysis for the day. So let's put this right here, start from the weekly time frame and look at this. Now, I remember talking about this last week. So the S&P 500 hasn't gone above 6,000. So this area has been holding this guy for quite some time already. Now let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture thing right here. So here's what I'm playing with. Impulse correction, minor impulse correction, then impulse correction. So normally I was expecting this to like move again impulsively to the upside, taking out this high. So that's always my thought process thing, yeah. Trend line pullback, price taking out the next area. But if you look at this, going off of psychological levels, it's getting really like, so I think the S&P for me still stands as the most favorable pair if I had to trade indices, because look at the structure thing right here. Where is price at, and where is price most likely going to gravitate to? So we went through 6,000, came back, there was an inability, and currently price has tested 6,000 again, this psychological level, and we're not breaking above 6,000 for some reason. You look at this piece right here, there's an inability, another inability right here. So there's still this difficulty for price to go through 6,000, and if I'm using the S&P 500 as the leading pair, this piece right here could tell me everything about those other pairs, because this could be an early indication, like an inability for us to go through 6,000, then we could see prices coming again to the downside like this. So just looking at it now, if price has to move to the downside, you could expect prices as well going above psychological levels to drop all the way to 5,000, but that's not something I'm looking at, because we have this trend line right here, and we've seen the pivot point respecting on this pair already. So you're looking at areas like this, and you're like, all right, cool, if price can pull back to these areas, I'm looking for buying opportunities again off of those areas. But for some reason the S&P 500 is not going above 6,000, so that's something to marvel about and pay attention to it. All right, cool. So take this out on the weekly time frame, step down to the daily, and let's see what's happening on the daily. Let's zoom in. Now if you look at this on the daily time frame, very interesting piece as well. So on lower time frames, you see there's this trend line right here, impulse correction, it got taken out, and you see price is moving to the upside, but it's an impulse correction. It's really struggling to move to the upside, and we have price coming back below this area of 6,000. So if price finds it difficult to go through this area right here, 6,000 psychological level, inability, where is price most likely going to gravitate to? The first area I'm looking at is this piece right here. If price starts moving to the downside, that's the first area we're taking out, this piece right here, we're taking out this piece. So there is still enough room for us to play to the downside. Now you look at this compared to, so you look at this on the S&P, sorry, you look at this on NAS, we have some room to the downside, perfect. You look at US30, we have, now US30 is playing already, so you still have some room to play to the downside. So that's really interesting, because let's look at this. I think the S&P has the best risk to reward if you have to take sales again to the downside. So personally, if price stays below 6,000, then I'm expecting a movement to an area like this and a possible movement back to this trend line right here, so we can take buys again to the upside. That's my thought process, bigger picture thing. So if you clean this, and let's look at this on the 8-hour time frame. You know what, before going down to the 8-hour time frame, let's put this piece right here, put on alert at this point, because that's an area I'm looking at. So keep it right there. Perfect. So let's step down to the 8-hour time frame. So here's it. So same thing, I had this impulse right here. There was an inability, so we had a break of this. I looked at it again from this channel point of view, and we had another break. So looking at this, it looks again like an impulse. So you get a break, you get a correction, impulse, correction. So yeah, I think the S&P looks really good for sales. So if I had to take sales on this pair, I think if I had like a perfect entry around this area. Now the best entry will have been around an area like this. So right here, stops above this area, and taking prices to this piece right here. That's a 1:4. Now if you get like good entries, you can get like maybe a 1:9 on this, but just looking at it, that's like the game plan on this. But we missed it, so let's see. Now there's a pullback thing happening right here. So you have an impulse, correction. If you step down to lower time frames, you see this impulse, you see this correction right here. So let's see, here it's on the 8-hour time frame. Let's see what the hourly is saying. Perfect. So that's it right there. So if you was looking at this on the hourly time frame, it's an impulse, it's a correction, taken out, impulse, it's a correction, taken out. Now personally, you could wait for prices to pull back to this area, another inability at this point, then you see price moving to the downside, and you can use this area as a protected high for your stop loss. So you're looking at something like, let's say something like this on the S&P 500. So this piece right here, and taking prices all the way to this area. So you're looking at, let's say 1:5 from this piece right here. On the S&P 500, if you get price pulling back to this area. Now I'm not going to trade this, but I'm just saying that's my thought process if I had to, unless I really see like a perfect setup thing lining up. But you look at the S&P 500, you look at NAS100, similar place, and you look at US30, similar place. Now this guy looks to be selling like currently, so same thing to the downside. Like NAS100, expecting this sells. The S&P 500, let's see, expecting this sells as well. So that's what I'm looking at, and the only thing I'm currently sat in is my drawdown on gold. So let's see how this plays out coming into next week. So now we looking at this piece, if we go through this area, then there's no fear. If we go through this area on gold, there's no fear on this pair or on the trade. So I put an alert at this point. So if we go through this lows, then there's nothing to worry about. We can get, let's say, a really good trade on this. If we go through, yeah, we could see prices coming back to areas like this. So that's my analysis right there, guys. So you've seen the DXY. That's why I'm looking on the DXY, expecting prices to push again to the upside right there. And on gold, using that same principle, I'm expecting prices to move to the downside. If I'm wrong on this DXY move and you see price moving to the downside, then you see this guy moving again to the upside, taking me out. So that's fine. You look for another entry. On the indices, expecting the sells. This one, expecting the sells. S&P, same thing, expecting the sells as well. Put this on the 8-hour time frame right here. So yeah, all right guys, so that's it for me this week. And again, make sure you're patient with your setups, be consistent with everything you do, even if you've seen or taken losses. And above all, make sure you pray, because there's certain things you can look on the chart. Technicals is not going to help you sometimes. You need to pray as well. So make sure you're praying and just ask the Lord to give you the strength to stay consistent with your system and your setups. All right, guys, that's it for me, and I'll see you during the next one. Bye for now.